All right, everybody, it is 6 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Thank you all for coming to the inaugural meeting of the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee. My name is Matt Miller. I'm the Director of Community Development. Just so everybody knows who everybody else is, why don't we go around the table and introduce ourselves. Kate, you want to start?
Sure, yeah, Kate Mahoney Myers. I own Living Well Chiropractic on Ricker Street.
I'm Ethan Benson. I'm a downtown resident, and I do work for the city of Plattsburgh.
Joe Rotella, and property owner downtown Plattsburgh, in business now.
Levi Ritter, I'm the police chief.
Marianne Buckle-Ryder, I'm an attorney and own property downtown.
Michael Bissett, I'm the assistant superintendent of public works in the city of Plattsburgh.
Patrick McFarland, I'm the common counselor assigned to this committee. Dave Merkel, property owner.
Rodney Brown, and I'm the county deputy administrator and planning director.
Okay. This first meeting that starts at 6 is the organizational meeting that was mandated in the resolution that created this committee. It's the meeting at which we select officers and establish rules of procedure. We have agendas outside of this meeting and the meeting to immediately follow it, at which we have a more normal agenda when we talk about issues of interest to the city. So the agenda for the 6 o'clock meeting, we've all gone around the room. Everybody here, everybody is present, all of the PAC members except for Bob Garcia, Executive Director of the Strand, who had a board meeting but is hoping to be here a little later tonight. So we will go on to the first item on the 6 o'clock meeting, which is the nomination of the chairperson of this committee. At this time, the advisory committee will entertain nominations from the floor for the position of chair of the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee. The chair's role will be to set the agenda, schedule, and preside over all meetings, delegate committee-related responsibilities, and advise the city of Plattsburgh's Common Council of any recommendations, reports, relevant information, or requests. Do I have any nominations from the floor for the person of chair?
I nominate Matthew Miller, if you're interested.
Yes, I am.
I'll second the nomination.
I guess we'll go around the room.
We should see if anyone else has nominations.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, are there any other nominations?
I nominate Joe Rotella.
No.
Yeah, you
Just go.
can share with planning or zoning before we do it. Okay.
Any other nominations? All right, we'll do a, discussion, I'm sorry.
You don't see any problem with conflict?
I don't see any problem. It's a committee whose mandate is pretty essential to the success of several other projects that the Community Development Office is handling, so I'm sure I can be objective.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you can't, we'll overrule you.
Exactly.
And you're only an advisory committee anyway.
Yeah.
Are there nominations from the chair still being, from the floor being still accepted?
Well, nominations from the committee members.
Not the floor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call. Kate? Ethan? Joe? G?
Aye.
Yes. Aye.
Congratulations.
Okay. We'll move on to nominations from committee members for the position of vice chair. The advisory committee will entertain nominations for the position of vice chair of the advisory committee. The vice chair's role is to assist the chair in setting the agenda and presiding over all meetings and to perform the full duties of the chair in the event the chair is not in attendance. Do I have any nominations from the committee members? Okay. Ethan, do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
I'll second Steve's nomination of Ethan.
I'll get better at this. Any other nominations? Discussion of the nomination? Roll call, Kate?
I think we can dispense with the roll call if there's only one person up for it.
Let me see, just all in favor.
I'm willing to go voice vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? Motion carried. Nomination of secretary. The advisory committee will entertain nominations from the committee for the position of secretary of the advisory committee. Secretary role is to assist the chair in setting and reviewing the agenda and to record minutes of all meetings. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate McFarland.
McFarland, do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I'm not particularly interested if anyone else wants to.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. Discussion on the nomination? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Put it on the record.
Motion carried. Okay, we'll move on to establishing rules and procedures. Whereas the committee must establish standard rules of procedure. Resolve the following rules of procedure are accepted and adopted by the advisory committee. And it be it further resolved that future adjustments or additions to the following can be made through the introduction and adoption of amendments. Voting procedures. As currently constituted, the advisory committee is comprised of a maximum of 12 members. Once all 12 members have been confirmed by the common council, the quorum for voting will be 7 members. Until such time as all 12 members have been confirmed, or should the common council authorize an increase or decrease in the size of the advisory committee, a quorum for voting will be set at 1 member greater than 1/2 of the members approved by the common council. If a quorum exists, a simple majority vote shall be required for a proposal to be approved and a recommendation made to the common council. It shall be permitted to vote to table and delay action on proposal. In the event the vote is tied, the chair shall have the right to cast a tie-breaking vote. If a proposal is approved by the advisory committee, the chair will present their recommendations to the common council. Section B, meetings. The common council established that the advisory committee shall meet at least quarterly within City Hall. No more frequent meetings are permitted. A quorum must be present in order for an official meeting to be convened. The advisory committee shall comply with the New York Open Meetings Law and the New York Freedom of Information Act. Meetings will be open to the public and at a time agreed upon by the advisory committee. Meeting agendas will be made public at an appropriate time in accordance with the established policy of the City of Plattsburgh. Public comment, section C. During official meetings, members of the public will be provided opportunities to address the committee regarding their concerns involving both items on the agenda and other parking-related matters. 1 period of public comment shall be provided at the beginning of each meeting for those individuals wishing to speak about items on the meeting's agenda. A second period shall be provided at the end of each meeting to allow for public comment on any parking-related issue. Individual speakers shall be required to limit their remarks to a maximum of 5 minutes unless otherwise approved by the chair. It is intended that the advisory committee shall incorporate public comments into their discussion rather than respond directly to the public. And section D, Robert's Rules of Order. In any situation not explicitly addressed in this resolution, Robert's Rules of Order shall apply.
So moved.
So moved, do I have a second? Keith seconds?
Second.
Pat, you're taking minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Discussion on the motion?
Just on, part A,
Mhm.
is that the chair will follow normal, Robert's Rules of Order and will not vote unless there is a tiebreak?
That wasn't the intention. We're kind of in an odd situation because unlike the common council where there's a presiding officer who doesn't normally vote, who can vote to break a tie, we don't have the same setup here, so I'm open to any suggestions that anybody has for what happens in the event of a tie. If a tie is the same as a defeat and a motion goes down, either way, but it's up to the committee.
Well, if there's 12 members and everybody, all but one vote, you should,
Mhm.
you should, any problems with ties, right?
Sure, unless we don't have,
Somebody's not here.
Somebody's asking. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it matters if the chair only votes when there's a tie. It really doesn't affect anything.
That's fine with me, I'm only voting if there's a tie.
There goes that conflict of interest then.
There it goes. Okay. All right, so can I have a motion for an amendment?
Move to amend that the chair will not be a voting member unless, except in case of a tie.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion on the amendment?
It does make sense, that way you're never voting twice.
Right.
You're only
Yeah, one man,
voting
one vote.
maximum once.
Did I have a second? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Peg Merkel seconded.
All right, discussion on the amendment?
I agree, Rodney, makes sense.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, amendment carries. All right, any further discussion on the rules and procedures motion in general? Okay. I guess we'll do a round since this is more important one. Okay, you want to start?
Oh, actually, point of order, Mr. Chairman, did we want to put anything in the rules, about attendance? I know this common council.
Oh, yeah.
If you miss 3 consecutive meetings, the council may move to remove you. This is, I don't know if we need to do it because the common council, oversees who is on the board, and I don't think the board here has, any power to remove or add members, although we could make a recommendation to the common council that this person hasn't shown up 3 consecutive times or something along that lines. I'm not sure if it's actually needed,
Yeah, I
I don't
don't
know, in the city, because, being on the planning board, we missed 3 meetings, and we could upstairs to the mayor and the council, or go, unless you're in the hospital or something like that, But just missing a period, we're already in the system, I think.
I imagine that must be in the planning board's rules though. I know it's on the common council's rules, but,
I guess council did years ago, 5 years ago.
okay.
I guess the authorizing resolution did allow us to set our own rules and procedures, so that we could put something in that says, should any committee member miss 3 consecutive meetings, the committee may choose to recommend to the common council that the committee members remove.
You don't go to Florida, right? Just kidding.
Actually, though, we're on the subject of meetings, somehow many of us have different schedules that conflict, and a lot of boards I'm on, we send out a doodle, when we check dates, I think that would be a positive step, because to be dictated to if somebody definitely has a conflict, then nobody knows what days these meetings are happening, so.
Yeah,
It
that's
would be
what you're-
good if that happened, it would be, at least you would get some buy-in to it.
Yeah, and there's an item at the end of the second meeting's agenda, we discuss when we want to meet, if we want to set a standard date, or if we want to just do it one at a time, via the doodle poll as you suggested. So,
Well, we can leave it and use it as an automatic basis, even if this person hasn't shown up in 3 weeks, do we want to get the motion done?
Yeah.
I don't think you need to change the
I don't think so.
Right, okay.
rules.
All right, so we are on voting on the motion as a whole. So we'll go around the table, Kate?
Yes.
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 Yep.
All right, so that's carried. Moving on to item 5, the advisory committee's mandate. Now, this is taken directly out of the authorizing resolution. In the resolution creating the advisory committee, the common council mandated to undertake the following tasks. Review the parking study completed by Carl Walker Inc. and accepted by the common council on March 1st, 2018, and you all have a copy of that in your packets. Review the downtown parking special assessment district. Review reports on parking usage, capacity, revenue, and enforcement based on data provided by the parking usage and payment systems, as well as enforcement data provided by the city's parking enforcement officer. Research and evaluate potential options for enhancements and improvements to the city's parking system with an emphasis on the downtown area. Produce a semi-annual report to inform the common council and the public on the data and recommendations for the parking system, including parking behavior and a financial summary of the system. Send to the common council recommendations for changes to the parking system, including adjustments to rates and enforcement policies once the majority of the committee members vote in favor of the recommendation. The advisory committee, in coordination with city staff, will work to provide sufficient additional capacity to replace the current capacity in the Derby Street parking lot, and that this additional capacity should be ready for use before significant development of the Derby lot begins. Therefore, it's resolved that the PPAC, Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee, I'm just going to use that acronym moving forward, acknowledges and accepts the role and tasks set for by the common council in its resolution dated November 29th, 2018.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second by Ethan. Discussion on the motion?
I guess the only thing I'd like to point out is that unless somebody disagrees, this makes it pretty clear that we're not debating whether we should move forward with the development of the Derby Street parking lot. It's assumed that that's moving forward and that we are looking at replacing the parking that would be required with that development moving forward.
That
That's
is
pretty
the
important.
assumption. Any further discussion?
Yes, review of the downtown parking special assessment district. Do we have any documentation in regards to that?
We do. I don't believe that I printed it out for everybody, but I have a copy here, and we have digital copies that we can reference up on the projector during further discussion during the regular meeting. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. Roll call. Kate? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll close the organizational meeting, and we will start immediately with the second regular meeting. So the attendance list is the same as the prior meeting. Only Bob Garcia is absent. Comments from the chair. I don't have anything specifically to discuss right now, but we will move on to the public comment period on agenda items only at this time. So if anybody would like to speak on items on the agenda for the regular meeting, please step forward to the lectern.
Hello and good evening. I'm Debbie Momot, property owner in the city of Plattsburgh. Regarding the comment just made, the development, from my understanding, was contingent on parking being resolved. So I still consider that that is a major concern. Where our properties are located on Bridge Street, it is a safety issue if that goes away for our tenants. We have 5 units. All the tenants are 30 and under, female at this point. We will lose all the long-term parking within a safe walking distance to those apartments. So I would just ask that you keep that in mind as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Yes, Chairman, if I may.
Hi folks, Scott Allen, business owner downtown and past property owner downtown and soon to be, once again, a property owner downtown. I know a lot of you folks here and I really admire your dedication and spirit of volunteering to serve on this committee. However, two comments I'd like to make. I think the committee should have been formed before the RFP was sent out to the developers. And I think the timing's a little off here. I think it's the cart before the horse here. And the second comment is what you hold, I think, in your committee's hands are for some very important decisions with respect to the future of downtown Plattsburgh. And I hope none of you take it lightly. And I hope you do consider the impact. And having said that, I'll look forward to attending your future meetings and hearing the discussion on this. There's certainly a lot of things for I think all of you to consider and for all of us to consider as community members of downtown Plattsburgh. So look forward to talking with you again. Thank you all.
Thanks, Scott. Any other members of the public?
I wasn't really prepared to speak, but I'm just going to say a couple comments, and I agree. I'm glad that a committee is formed. I'm a property owner within the downtown corridor. I've lived in the downtown corridor for almost 30 years now, and one of the things I'd like you to consider is that walking 2 blocks is not necessarily necessary. I think that you need to think about, I lived in Montreal for 7 years, that a lot of people that live in a downtown area are accustomed to walking 10 or 12 blocks. And I think a lot of city residents have been a little spoiled in just walking 2 blocks. I think that you need to think of a multi-approach, which I'm sure you're going to do, in other large cities and cities that have downtown development with little parking. They do a combination of residential and commercial use where property owners pay for, the tenants pay for parking permits, which are noted in their windshield, and that there's various ways to handle this. You can do periods of time at night that they're permitted to park there. You'll have to think about snow removal, but I think as a property owner and also of rental and residential, that I know from a commercial standpoint that the woman that spoke that has commercial property, a lot of tenants would be willing to either pay for that or build it into your rent structure so that they could have parking on the street at certain areas in certain distances from those properties. I'm glad to see that the city is going to invest, although I don't know how we're going to come up with the money for the removal of the Glens Falls National Bank building and conversion to parking. And I think that you need to really think a lot about how you're going to utilize that both in short and long term. And then the parking issue of down near the marina, the Plattsburgh Marina, that's very much underutilized. And of course, the Bridge Street parking area that's now primarily used by Steve Brody for the auctions. These are all areas that I think we need to look very closely at. And thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing some positive development. And I ask that the public be really involved more. Maybe you could, I know you advertise, but I think the more we can get the public involved, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Any other members of the public?
Hello, my name is Tara Glenn. I'm a citizen of Plattsburgh, of the city of Plattsburgh, and I'm a housing advocate in the community. And I would just ask, and especially in release as we've been talking about tenants' rights, a fair number of our city are extremely low income and live below the poverty line. So any discussion about parking enforcement, parking permits, increase of rent to absorb costs of parking permits, how that impacts vouchers and other things like that, I would strongly advise that this panel consider and reach out to housing advocates in the community as well as government agencies to understand how this will impact our community. As far as walking distances, while I do understand and respect that, for a lot of people walking 6 or plus blocks isn't that big of a deal. Again, we have low-income people with small children, handicapped people where walking distances are a very large deal. The Durkee Street lot covers access to DSS, Social Security, as well as the government buildings. And that's an important thing as a county seat for people all over Clinton County to have access to. A lot of those people are also low income and may have handicapped issues. And also access to the only grocery store downtown. We're walking more than, even walking 2 blocks with a subset of groceries with small children or handicapped can be extremely difficult. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak?
My name is Joseph Musso. I've been a city resident for 40 some odd years. I'm also a county employee and the president of CSCA Local 884, Unit 6450. Hi, Joe. How's it going, buddy? You had the greatest prosciutto. I just want to point out to the esteemed Rodney Brown, Assistant County Administrator, and to this committee and to Mayor Reed that county employees have been afforded free parking in the Durkee Street parking lot. And according to the rules established by the Public Employee Relations Board, any change in the benefit of free parking is a mandatory subject of negotiations, and the county will have to sit down with us and discuss any plans that would remove this economic benefit to county employees. Thank you.
Any other members?
My name is Terry Broderick, and I actually work at Clinton County Department of Social Services. And just to add to what Mr. Musso just said, I think that you're all forgetting, maybe not forgetting, but maybe not taking into complete consideration all the other businesses along Durkee Street. We have the federal building across from Clinton County Department of Social Services. There's lots of little businesses that are sprinkled throughout Durkee Street. All those business owners, all the clients that they serve, all utilize that parking lot. And as the other young lady in the back said, many of them are handicapped, many of them have health conditions. Walking even 1 block it's not an option for them. We have people that I work with walking 1 block is not an option for them. People I work with are constantly in and out of the building, running to emergencies for child safety purposes, to transport children to and from visitation. And they can't be running 1 and 2 blocks. That's even if there's a parking space available over on Market Street where that parking lot will be created. They have bags that they have with them, they have car seats that they have with them. It's not conducive to serving the public. And none of this, from what I've read, I was at the last week's meeting, none of this has been taken into consideration. And one suggestion had been people that work for the county can park on the ramp behind the federal building. That's full every day. That's full from the people that work at the federal building and also the people that conduct business in the federal building. So that's really not an option. And by the time we get to work, I am sure that the parking lot that's going to be created on Margaret Street is going to be full. There's already a problem parking down there. I myself have circled the block several times looking for a parking space. So to say that we can park there would be great if it was a really viable option, and I don't feel it is. So I hope you take all that into consideration as well. And one more thing also. The parking lot in Durkee Street, you also utilize that every year. You have the Mayor's Cup, you have 4th of July, you have all kinds of events where you block it off and it's partitioned off. Where are people gonna go to park their cars to come and enjoy those events in the city that actually draws business to the city? I'd like to know too at some point if any of that has been taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Of course, I meant to say and address those issues, but I'm sure the board is going to address this. You know, one thing I haven't really heard of, I know that every time it comes up, it's some issue of money. I thought that it was going to be part of the DRI. I really think that we need a parking garage. I really think that we need to have some kind of public transportation other than the county bus to utilize maybe parking, like I said, down by the marina or further away. It's true that there are a lot of handicapped people. One of my major concerns, and I grew up with, you know, a family business downtown, is that most of the parking spaces in the downtown corridor are actually filled with business owners or employees. And we really need to address this because obviously, from my standpoint, and other people that have to visit businesses or work downtown or come to social services, they need parking, they need access to the buildings closer than people that actually work at those businesses. And I don't know how we're gonna make this all happen. I think over time, as you know, if we get the DRI project going and there's more people downtown that can bring money to the downtown businesses and corridor, then I think the city will benefit obviously from taxes, and maybe some of these shortcomings we can look at to fund. But in the meantime, there is immediate concern. I live on Couch Street, and my tenants, you know, and other tenants take up parking on the street. And we have a real issue. If we want to attract more people to live downtown, it's kind of a catch-22. If we want more people to live downtown, we don't have enough parking for the residents or businesses. We have to do a combination of times that people can park and snow removal. There's a lot to address. So I do ask that you consider a parking garage and, you know, some kind of public transportation to parking outside of 1 or 2 blocks. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And this is a general discussion of the role and goals of the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee. And I wanted to read just a few things. There was a non-binding resolution that was passed by the City Council in October before the official resolution that established this committee, in which they announced their endorsement of a certain number of precepts. So this is from that non-binding resolution. Now therefore it is hereby resolved that the Common Council supports the transition to a paid parking system within the city's downtown district, which shall rely on technological solutions. The committee will be required to produce a semi-annual report to inform the council and the public on the data behind the system, including behavior and a financial summary. And the advisory committee will recommend parking system changes, including adjustments to rates and enforcement policies. And the Common Council will explore mechanisms to allow for the new parking system to be self-funded. This may include paid parking spots with different rates for on-street and off-street parking, including incentives at established off-street locations for discounted all-day parking, and a mechanism to allow for any surplus revenue collected by the parking system to improve the maintenance, expansion, enforcement of the system, with the tangential goal of reducing the cost of the downtown parking assessment district. So that, with the items that were in the official authorizing resolution, are the mandate for the committee. So I know I've spoken to several of you about your thoughts on a paid parking system for downtown Plattsburgh. Before we move too far past that, I wanted to see if anybody wanted to discuss that before we get into the details, what your initial thoughts are, or if we're all okay with that understanding moving forward, that it is the eventual goal to have a paid system in downtown to manage parking.
Kind of is paid now, although most people don't see it.
Yeah.
The special assessment district tax, which the county pays on their building, I pay on mine, Marianne pays on hers, Joe pays on his, pays for it, and has paid for it. So it kind of has been paid. So this is just another layer of expense that may be needed, but if we're going to add this, layer, we may look at abolishing the district.
Yeah, and taking a look at the district is certainly something that we'll look at, and, yeah.
Well, it's number 4 of the parking study too, is eliminating the district.
Yeah.
For me, the paid parking system, and I know we spoke to John Forster Carl Walker a number of times, is not to generate revenue for the general fund necessarily, although the funds will be used to help fund the parking, but it's to align incentives with turnover, especially on street parking. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot that people want to park on the street, they want to park where it's convenient, they don't want to walk 2 blocks. And one of the, if you look at all the things that John Forster pointed out in his parking study and the data he provided us, it was that there's not a lot of turnover in Plattsburgh because we've had this laissez-faire sort of parking system where kind of first come, first serve, stay as long as you want. I believe I saw in one of his diagrams that Clinton Street has 98% capacity because basically people don't move. there. So the paid parking system is not to generate revenue, it's not an expense driven, although it will, and that will help pay for the paid parking system in and of itself, and maybe expansions into the parking system. But the real push for a paid parking system is to align incentives with a efficient parking system downtown. And I think it's absolutely necessary. He mentions in his parking study, perhaps increasing rates depending on how long you stay there. He mentions 15 to 30 minutes perhaps free, and then increasing rates the longer you want to stay. And I think that's better because the parking system we have now that's been started to be enforced on January 3rd.
I would add again, there's enforcement stop, when enforcement was going on, there was parking turnover. But at some point, the enforcement stopped, and that's why you have people that couldn't speak in front of places.
I would just say also that, you know, one of the things that the study points out that was to me very surprising, I didn't actually know this, is that most of the parking in Plattsburgh is very near wherever anybody is going, whether it's their home or their business or whatever else. There's very little distance between where people are parking and where they're going, which is, you know,
It's a small downtown.
Yeah, but it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But, you know, Clinton, and I would say, you know, I am on Clinton Street. There's a lot of turnover. You know, you don't see the same cars there in the morning that you see in the afternoon that you see in the evening. I moved 3 times today. My first day on the committee, I should
Well, that's the.
But I also rent a lot. I rent spaces in a lot that's, you know, for myself and my employees. So I don't really need to park in the city and the street, and I don't encourage it.
All street spaces.
Yes, I pay, you know, a monthly rate for 3 or 4 spots there.
I will say that the current enforcement of our parking system will encourage turnover.
Oh, sure.
Definitely, but it does it in a rather inefficient way, as it kind of manufactures you need to move your car every 2 hours.
I think right now you drive down City Hall Place, and there's a lot of parking spaces, and it's filled up at lunchtime, people in the restaurant eating, and they're gone. You know, I noticed a big difference coming out in downtown every day, and the enforcement has started. I think the big difference would be when Cal gets back in the month, because they're going to be picking up a lot of parking spaces. That's when we're going to see a difference. When it's, you know, whether we fill up downtown. I mean, 11:30 today, I drove down City Hall Place, I parked right in front of the Pepper, within my building. You know, there's parking spaces. In the morning, it's like air. You know, right now, I mean, the enforcement, I think, is helping. There's a big difference when Cal gets back.
I agree, Pat. If we're going to consider paid parking, and some component of this will probably going to have to be paid parking, it's to manage the parking. It's not to necessarily to generate revenue. And it may not include every parking space and every person, because there probably will need to be exceptions. I know on the agenda later on we'll be considering permits. There are some people that we probably would have to issue permits for that would not be able to afford parking close to their destination because of whatever limitations they may have. But I could easily see where a paid system would need to be part of the solution.
Also, we need to do something about handicap spots. There are not on the street parking. There are very few. There's nothing on Clinton Street, and that's a significant portion of the on-street parking.
I'll make a point of order that Mother Garcia has joined.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Were there any items in the parking study that any of the committee members wanted to discuss while we are having a general discussion?
Well, it seems that number one's got to be pretty important. I believe that's where you first mentioned going to the system.
Yeah.
And if you look at number G, talks about rates. Here it talks about escalating rates, which is what I was alluding to earlier. I think that's why when you asked about the paid parking system, It does seem like that is the number one recommendation of the parking study. The other thing, which gets the most attention, is number 3, add parking capacity, basically to replace Turkey Street. Clearly with glass balls, that has made the news, and that's certainly going to be a big part. The other part that I think that gets ignored quite a bit from public discussion, but is of absolute importance, is number 8, to improve Green Street for vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian access from the harbor area to the downtown. I think that's necessary because not too far from downtown, we have arguably or practically unlimited amount of free parking. Right now, it's not easily accessible because you either have to go all the way down to Dock Street and back, or down Green Street and back up. But if we can improve pedestrian and vehicle and bicycle traffic there, that could be a way to alleviate people's long-term parking needs. I know Ms. Momont, she was the first person we had come up and express her tenets. Now, clearly this isn't a fix for what she said, because she was afraid of safety and long-distance traveling, and the harbor area is not going to be a convenient place to park. But if we're talking about tenants who are used to parking on the streets, if we give people parking permits, if there's a parking ban due to snow, I do think, and as Ms. Broderick brought up with special events as well, I do think using that large fount of parking down at the harbor, if we can incorporate that into our parking plan, is definitely a necessity.
And I'm not sure who mentioned it, but somebody mentioned that, you know, we needed to have some kind of system for like vans or something, other than county buses. That maybe we could develop some kind of shuttle system so that people who park down there know that at certain times there will be transportation up if they're not able to walk.
Yeah, we've done some preliminary inquiries into the cost of something like that. Yep.
So, are they still using that for snow melting?
Self-storage, yes.
Yeah.
Currently we are, but obviously we need to sacrifice space sometime. We do have other snow storage in the city, we get to, which is a more effective.
What's the max percentage of that lot do you ever see needing for snow storage?
30 to 50%.
Okay.
That's the last 3 years been pretty mild as far as volume of snow.
Do you have flexibility where, what portion of the lot to use?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to stuff in the back more than the train station primarily. Depending on access to those lots, we can do it.
One thing I will say about number 8, improving access on Green Street. This topic has come up in a number of different meetings that we've had involving the DRI, Saranac River Trail, the NYSEG, Saranac River remediation. Given the amount of heavy truck traffic that Green Street is going to be seeing over the next couple of years, and this is in addition to the regular trucks that come and go from the plant, NYSEG is going to be using staging areas on either side of the railroad cut down Green Street to access the Saranac River for future remediation efforts to take place over the next 3 or 4 years. That in addition to the upcoming demolition of the MLD site down on Green Street, plus the regular truck traffic. There was a group decision made at a large meeting back in October that those additional trucks and traffic would likely destroy any improvements that we made to Green Street at this time. So we made the decision, Green Street had been intended to be part of Saranac River Trail Phase 3. We made the decision to strip that section off of it and reallocate the fund. We're still talking to DOT about that, but anything that we do with Green Street, at least for the next few years, is likely to see some significant wear and tear before it is.
Can we make the wear and tears pay for the improvements?
We could, but that would require a separate negotiation with NYSEG. And as a utility,
You're damaging their property. What's to negotiate? They got.
They did it when they built the windmills up north and west.
yeah,
They got money out of it.
Yeah.
that's certainly something we can talk about.
I don't think it's unreasonable.
Okay.
There's that, and there's, he points out, Green Street number 8, but there's perhaps other ways to access, the harbor main parking.
Oh, yeah.
The other part I would say is number 14, implement a residential parking permit program for downtown residents.
Mhm.
We may also want to consider that, for, downtown employees. DSS is the first one that comes to mind, because as Ms. Broderick pointed out, I mean, they're right across the street from the Durkee Street lot. I imagine this is gonna impact them greatly.
Sure.
And perhaps a parking permit sort of situation could alleviate some of them.
Okay. Anyone else like to discuss anything in the parking study?
Number 2, can you just give us a brief description of where we are with the Durkee Street development? Because this statement said that the Durkee Street development should include a requirement, the RFP should include a requirement to meet parking demand for new development and replace some parking spaces to be removed from the lot. My understanding is we're looking to replace all of them because there won't be any public spaces available in the Durkee Street lot, maybe except for the small structure.
Mhm.
Can you bring us up to date? And I know that the negotiations are ongoing with the developer, but where we are now.
Sure. When we released the RFP for the Durkee Street lots, we did take a look at the parking study. The decision was made at that point to require any potential response to that RFP to include at least enough parking for the needs of the development going on the Durkee Street lot. We did not require them to include anything to replace any parking that might be lost. When we received the response from prime companies, the developer that the council agreed to move forward with last week, they had included, as was specified in the RFP, enough parking to handle their own needs for the development that they were proposing. After some initial discussions with the city and the discussions were based on the city's need to see some type of public parking be made available on the site somewhere, because we knew that was a very sensitive and important issue for the city. In a very short amount of time, they made significant adjustments to their design to allow for diagonal parking, which would take up some of the Durkee Street site on Durkee and Bridge Streets. So that was a concession that they made. It adds about, what, Ethan, 50, 60?
Is that for their development or?
No, that's actually to be public parking. Yep.
He did stress that was their schematic, their plan, but that was not going to be their doing.
No, and that's going to be part of further discussions between not only prime companies, our consultants at Durkee Project, the city, but also Saratoga Associates, the primary contractor for the streetscape and riverfront access project, and several state agencies are involved, to see what pot of money those improvements can come from, whether it's the streetscape money, the riverfront access money, or some other source. But we've had initial discussions. Certainly several additional things need to be clarified, but those discussions are ongoing.
I can bring up that Todd Curley from Prime Companies indicated that due to the public concern of parking, they're investigating putting a second underground parking garage under building number 2. Right now, they anticipate a parking garage that can house about 70 vehicles under building number 1, although that would be primarily to, I think, meet the needs of the lot. But if they can work out getting another one underneath building number 2, which I imagine would be about 35 spots, that would free up public parking, whether it's down there or on the surface area. So I know they're taking that into consideration, whether that can happen or not. Underground parking.
But they're very aware this is an important issue.
I'm encouraged that not only are they taking care of the demand they'll be creating with their development, that, you know, the city is working with them to also create additional spaces that will help ameliorate the impact of the loss of all the public spaces on Turkey Street. For everybody who is listening, I think it's important to note in my review of the documentation that was provided in anticipation for this meeting, there are enough spaces that we'll be considering as a committee that exceeds the number that would be losing in Turkey Street. Now, it depends on a few different things, but at least again, it's encouraging that we're not going to end up having less spaces. Hopefully we'll have equal or possibly even more spaces when we're done.
They just might not be
Greater
as.
demand.
That's right, they're going to be in different places.
But there's gonna be greater demand that wasn't there before on those same spaces.
We can only hope that there will.
Well, you've got 127 units.
But they're going to take care of the residential demand, probably not all the commercial demand.
Yeah, the parking they built onto the Durkee site should handle all the needs that they have for their residential and commercial space.
So but the number that's over and above that is what?
What, on the site itself?
Yeah.
I think they put in enough to handle their own needs
I'm
based
not
on
talking the
their.
diagonal either, because I don't think the diagonal's gonna work. You tried it once. I don't wanna say people in Plattsburgh don't know how to drive, but.
What are you saying?
It didn't work, okay? So, I see the diagonal on Bridge Street across from the co-op on both sides, and I'm like, there's no way that's working. I mean, people just don't know how to color in the lines, you know? It's not happening. I don't see it.
Okay.
Especially if you get a big storm.
But Patrick, did you say that they're looking at trying to put in at least 60 to 70 total extra spots that are not going to be eaten up by the residential?
Probably about 35 if that lot is doable.
Yeah, they're determining from their perspective whether that is financially feasible and continue to keep development more or less as it is.
But they're, I mean, they're going to be making money on this project.
Sure.
And they're being given a lot of concessions. So some of that money they're going to be making should perhaps be invested in this sort of thing.
Sure.
I mean, seriously, I mean, that has always been, I have never understood how the county and the town and the city do these payment in lieu of taxation deals, give people these great big breaks on purchasing property that's prime property to the residents, and don't get much in return.
Purchase for a dollar.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna they're gonna be charging top dollar for these apartments. And how is that gonna also affect, I mean, I know this is not for this meeting, okay?
But it clearly bothers you, I hear that.
Well, I have three apartments above my, above my office. And, is that gonna affect my ability to rent? Is that gonna affect my people's ability to find parking? They're already having difficulty in that regard. So I'm just saying that if these people are being given this sweetheart deal, let's hold their feet to the fire and make them give us something back.
And that will certainly be part of our discussion.
Sorry now, aren't you, Patrick?
Would anybody like to discuss any other items from the parking study?
One item, J on number 1. Secondary parking supplies may emerge as private landowners open their parking areas for paid parking. Does the city want to regulate these businesses? And also the, what is the other one? Oh, policies in place to maintain downtown buildings and avoid. There seems to be an emphasis on private lots. Has the city had any discussions on regulation of private lots that are owned by private personnel as part of this? I would advocate that we allow zoning to take care of that in terms of the number of lots that they need. I would think that those would be hands-off for public parking, unless the private landowners want to make them available.
Yeah, since I started the city, I'm not aware of any discussions about regulating private parking areas. Whether they've taken place in the past, I can't say.
I don't own a private parking area, I rent one.
Yeah. But that is not something that we are currently pursuing, but it's certainly something that we can discuss further if you like. Any other items from the parking study? All right, and before we move on, I just wanted to touch on the downtown special assessment district. I know several of you here are property owners, so are aware of how it works, but for everyone else, in 1986, the city council passed a resolution creating the downtown special parking assessment district. The intention of this resolution was to create a separate levy on property owners within the downtown area.
Can you back up? It's happened in the 60s.
Yeah, the original one was from '69, but the last modification to it was from '86.
Yeah, I mean, people have been paying since the 60s.
Okay.
I think that needs to be understood.
Okay, understood. Can you pull up the map of the? So the property owners downtown within a specified geographic district. Yeah, that's the authorizing resolution.
Yeah.
96. So this was taken from a poster in Joe McMahon's office. This is the current outline of the downtown parking assessment district. All the property owners within that district are assessed a levy based on the square footage of their property. And that money is used to both maintain the parking lots within that district and to acquire any potential new lots within that district. As Dave said, it's been in place since 1969, right?
I wasn't there, but I know it's the 60s.
Yeah. So that money is assessed on an annual level, and that is used to pay for the maintenance of the lots within that district. And it is also used to pay for improvements to those lots from time to time. Now, part of the committee's mandate was to assess the assessment district and to determine if any changes should be made. Now, given the fact that we only have a week and a half's worth of enforcement data under our belt right now, and it's difficult to say what the financial figures will look like from an enforcement standpoint after 3 months or 6 months, and that the assessment district has been in place for a very long time and is working fairly well. My recommendation at this point would be that we acknowledge that this is something that needs to be looked at, but given the lack of financial information we have to compare to whether the system would work with this change, the assessment district, or this change, that we put off any detailed discussion of changes to that district until a future time when we have more data to pull from.
Can you provide us with, if you have it, how much money is collected on an annual basis?
Yeah.
And how much do you have in reserve?
Okay, so there's about $71,000 that is collected on an annual basis. There is usually a surplus at the end of the year. That surplus is rolled into the parking fund, and that fund is used to pay for long-term improvements such as the improvements in the Derby Street lot from, I think it was 2011. Currently, there is a little more than $76,000 in reserve in that parking fund.
What's the debt?
The total amount of the debt, that figure I do not have, but the total debt service works out to about $1,700 a year.
And that's separate from the special assessment district on the base?
That's correct. Yeah, the oval assessment district.
Because it's commingled in the budget.
Yes, it's commingled in the budget, but the accounting for it is separate. And there's a different way that the value of the property is assessed over the oval. So does anybody have any comments? Would anybody like to discuss this further, or is everybody in agreement that, yes, this is something we need to discuss, but at this time, that discussion may be premature? Okay.
Yeah, I think after we talk about paid parking, we'll have a better idea, maybe what we want to do with that, if anything.
Do we have any data from when the city used to enforce? I mean, it was what, 2 or 3 years ago, we had a parking enforcement person. Do we have any data from that?
Being
From that?
Chief, what is the availability of statistics from a few years ago when we were actively enforcing?
I can get them. I just have
In
to-
terms of dollar amounts of fines?
So, you have to consider that not everybody pays their fines. So,
Shocking.
the figure is what the value would be for collection, you know, balanced against what is actually collected.
I paid about $30 a month.
So the figure from last year was 0 parking enforcement except for, you know, the majority of the tickets that we write from the police department's perspective are parking ban for snow removal, and that's a couple different areas. Limited parking ban, full city, and then the areas of the Durkee Street parking lot. So the fines that would have been collected last year, $45,000, 120. And that's without a dedicated person going around writing tickets.
That's just what people are really flaunting.
So over the course of last year, with 0 parking enforcement, 537 tickets were written. And most of those, I would say, with the exception of 50, were all parking ban for snow removal. In just the first 7 days of parking enforcement officer wrote 129 tickets, just in the downtown area. So, comparatively speaking, there's a significant amount of tickets that are going to be written when you actually have paid parking enforcement.
So it was 537 in a year versus 129 in a week.
I would hope that that number would go down now that they know that there's somebody on the
It's
beat.
gonna,
But we'll
it's
see.
going to go up.
Well, yes.
It is absolutely going to go up.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but he's saying it might go down from 129 tickets in 7 days.
Hopefully people will learn that there's now enforcement.
The parking ban tickets go down, but the other enforcement tickets will go up. If we're going for time, I mean, that's what we see when we go out and have to plow the first snowstorm of the year.
Yeah, you're towing 80 cars.
Yeah, and there's 300 out there.
Yep.
And so we're playing God for car.
Well, I can tell you, and we have some of the county employees here, human nature is that you're gonna park as close as you can to your place of business or whatever your destination is. We provide lots at the government center complex for our employees, but they're gonna park if able, closer if they can. And I know that once the enforcement initiated, Clinton Street Walk must have had a lot of county employees parking in it because it was virtually empty after the enforcement started again. And our lots were considerably more full. So hopefully people will learn that enforcement is going on and they don't want to get tickets. We'll see.
We will maintain that.
You don't sound convinced.
Anybody like to further discuss the assessment district before we move on? Okay. We'll move on to item 2, report from Chief Ritter detailing current parking system enforcement. I know Chief you just talked a little bit about, but anything you'd like to
Yeah,
add?
I mean, how much do you want me to get involved in that? I mean, everyone pretty much knows how downtown time parking works, correct?
Sure.
Now, Chief, I remember in a common council meeting a month ago, you were saying that even if you move your car one spot, that may not get you out of the ticket.
Right. It's the zone. So, at the very start of the street where it says parking, no parking in the arrow, or the timed parking in the arrow, and then the other end of that zone where it has the opposite arrow, that is the area where you need to move out of, not a space down the back.
Levi, people don't really try to do that, do they?
3 times today.
So yes, that is technically the way it is enforced.
Has that been publicized? Because that was never the case. It was always if you move 2 spots, you were, and you would go and argue with the officer who did the chalking and say, no, I was here and now I'm there. Do people know that?
I don't think we publicized that.
I think that's
Yeah,
huge.
I do too.
Because if you're looking at Clinton Street,
Yeah.
you're looking
For
at,
for
I
4
mean,
weeks, we put out flyers and warning tickets on the cars as an educational benefit. And we had both our community service officer and the parking enforcement officer talking to literally everybody.
however, I'm there every day, blah, 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 this is news to me, I'm just new on the committee. But if you're looking at Clinton Street, between those two signs is the entire block. I mean, so people need to know that, because you see people getting out and switching around and doing
I
whatever.
assume all of Clinton Street is one zone.
That's what I'm saying, it's, yeah.
I think it would help to have signage, because I talk to a lot of people and they don't know either, so.
Yeah. That's kind of predatory.
Somewhere it'll fall in a different area of discussion, but, I mean, like, if we're talking bigger cities and you're punching in a number for a space that you put a ticket in your dash, or, I don't know if we're going meters, I have no idea, but somehow the system has to come up where these spaces are numbered. So when you're chalking somebody, they're in Clinton 12 or whatever they're.
Because, the other thing you have to keep in mind is that the residents of the immediate downtown area are significantly less, economically able to do other things. I mean, you've got how many tenants that live above buildings on Clinton Street, and if they're only allowed to park there 2 hours a day, where are they gonna go? I mean, where? They can't go to Turkey Street.
Well, I think that's gonna be part of what we're discussing.
We're gonna make it all better.
Yeah, but I'm saying 2 hours for the entire street, for the whole day, I mean,
Right, so that's why talking about a permitting system really makes sense.
for the residents' need, and, it does.
Anybody have any other questions for the chief about enforcement, current enforcement policy before we move on?
You enforce just the downtown area? I don't wanna get, you guys,
No, it's
I don't want information that's confidential, but that you generally cover the assessment district, or further.
It covers anywhere where there's signage that indicates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that person that was hired, I mean, they'll be on Miller Street in front of the post office?
Now, obviously, there is one person.
Oh, yeah.
Limited by this, but yes.
But they can accomplish it a day.
Exactly. But yeah, high parking is the focus of why this officer was hired. Because anyone, the police department would say, there's a car parked in front of firecracker. Okay, we send an officer out there, they write a ticket. No problem. But to say, this car's been parked here for 4 hours, the officer has to go out there at that moment, and that's when minute one starts. That's the problem with the system that we have, and like, moving to a different system would make sense in the long run.
Has she written any tickets that are for parking? Because I know she's authorized to write code enforcement tickets as well.
None of those, no. Just parking tickets. She's been pretty busy.
They used to do expired registrations and things like that too.
They still do that?
Any other questions for the chief? All right, we'll move on to number 3, establishing official parking enforcement hours, and actually at the recommendation of the city's attorney. I'm going to change that to establish a recommendation for official parking enforcement hours, as this committee does not set policy, but this recommendation can be forwarded to the common council. So discussion on this, as the chief said, the enforcement that we currently have is limited to the fact that we have a single parking enforcement officer who works a standard 40-hour work week. So the idea is to not give people a false impression that the city is going to be ticketing 24 hours a day at this point. But to say that, what are the hours that Tori is working? Is it 8 to 4?
She works 8 to 4.
8 to 4, okay. So I think we should focus on a recommendation whereby the public is informed that while additional staff may be added to the parking enforcement office at some point in the future, it's disingenuous to say at this point that we're going to be enforcing 24 hours a day while everybody knows, especially since this is a public meeting, that we've got one person out there and she is working 8 to 4. So, should we set official enforcement hours, well, recommend official enforcement hours from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, with the understanding that those hours could be changed after the addition of more staff in the parking office? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me ask the question. If you make that recommendation, does that mean that even if somebody's technically in violation because they're parking on Saturday for a longer period of time than they're supposed to, then it's okay to do that?
No.
So they could still, if someone other than the official enforcement officer could be issuing a ticket?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, people can still get ticketed for, yeah, other parking violation, parking in a handicap space or anything that isn't, you know, specific.
Well, then, I mean, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday makes the most sense.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have it.
Why do we advertise?
Because it's on the agenda.
We don't want to muddle the issue either with the parking ban. That's the other thing you have. If you put it out here and say that it's 8 to 4 Monday, Friday, and we call parking ban, and someone's not gonna get a pile of people call up and say, I got ticketed, and,
We do as is.
Here comes the weekend.
here comes the weekend.
Well, the greatest demand is probably 8 to 4 on Monday through Friday. So I can see why that's where you set the hours at.
Oh, yeah.
I think the point of setting the hours is to set people's minds at ease. If they come in and it's like 8 o'clock at night, they know that they can't possibly go to this.
So I move that we don't recommend any hours at this point. I move that.
Do I have a second?
I do the second.
Discussion?
One of the positives of having enforcement hours for residents is knowing, at least in the short term, that you'll be able to park somewhere, especially people like on Clinton Street, on the Big Buck Park, and not have to worry about ticket overnight. Due to the parking enforcement email, we've gotten a lot of responses from residents looking at, if I park at night, will I get a ticket? How do I move my car? And so that is a question that I know a lot of constituents and residents have been asking, and so some form of ease of mind for them, at least in the short term, I can see benefit from that. I also can see the side where you don't want to say, it doesn't matter how long you park on a Saturday or Sunday, because it's the signs are the signs. So I can see both ways, but just as a resident.
Yeah, you're lulling them into a false sense of security.
Well, I see your point. Someone comes in, the sign says you can't park there more than 2 hours, whether it's 8 p.m. or 1 p.m. So I can imagine that, and lull them into a false sense of security. I can imagine telling people, hey, the meter maybe doesn't work past 4 p.m. You're fine. I can imagine them being like, I don't want to risk
Yeah,
it.
there's also the question of signage, because it's not specifically indicated on every sign out there that these hours only apply to 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, and cause, yeah, and cause legal issues.
We need to remove that 10-minute sign that we have for spots that says 10 minutes. And what use is 10 minutes?
We are gonna get to that.
That's on a Zoom stream.
That's on Market Street. There's 6 total. Further discussion on the motion made by Dave?
I don't think that the parking situation at night is that terrible. I mean, I don't know why, you would have to, if people are paranoid about enforcing that. Honestly, I think the bigger issue is what the zones are, how big those are gonna be during the day.
If you're parking in a.
Because what if you go to, you go to one business on Clinton Street and then you go up the street to a different business on Clinton Street, but it's within that 2-hour period and you hit the meter person, you're gonna be getting a ticket.
I don't know how in the weeds we want to get right now. I would assume that one of the things that we'll be addressing is what hours we're going to be regulating parking. There are a lot of places after 5 o'clock that we may not want to regulate parking. I would say a lot of places probably won't need regulation. But like you say, when there's events, people park everywhere. But most of the time, I wouldn't think that there really is an issue.
And then you just probably stop regulating at certain times anyway.
So I don't have a problem not making an official recommendation, because they have to set the hours in.
Okay. Any further discussion? We'll have a vote on Dave's motion not to recommend any official enforcement hours at this time. And we'll go around the table. Kate?
In favor.
In favor. Pat?
I'm opposed.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so that's what, 8 in favor, 2 opposed?
2 troublemakers.
Okay. So that carries and no official recommendation will be made this time. All right, so moving on to item 4, discussion of the need for a parking permit system for downtown residents and employees. City does, of course, understand the importance of this issue. One thing I should say about this is further legal research into this item. The city's attorney found that the state of New York actually has an itemized list of municipalities that have been issued the right to issue residence passes for people in their municipality. Something that the city of Plattsburgh currently does not have, but according to the city's attorney, it's a fairly straightforward procedure to pursue such authorization. So at this time, the establishment of a permit system for downtown residents and employees, from a legal standpoint, we don't have a solid foundation for. But we can recommend to the council that the city pursue that authority from the state to issue those permits.
I'll make a motion that the recommendation be made to the common council to pursue that.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of discussion's gonna have to go on who gets a permit and where it can be used, but I definitely think that some people will need to have permits.
Yeah.
Sir.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, so discussion of adjustments to downtown parking time limits. You want to bring up the current map?
I will say this, we'll probably need to make some adjustments to some of them, but it's probably too early with the data being collected to make those determinations.
So we have a map showing the current posted time limits for the downtown core. It goes anywhere from 2 minutes to 2 hours. Except for the off-street lots, which are, where am I not seeing?
Just right click probably, and you can rotate out and down.
All right, does that show up well?
This is a date.
Something got lost.
Yeah, I guess the data. So I can explain it a little bit. So you're gonna have, currently we have 2 lots that are technically 24 hours. You have the Turkey lot and then this lot separated by Broad right on the bottom, which is green.
Just for frame of reference, the big green shape there, that's the Durkee lot. And west is the.
I'm seeing yellow, but
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I'm checking the top one. But you're gonna have Oak Street, the first start before you get to Division Street. That's 2-hour parking on both sides. Once you get past Division Street, it turns into 90-minute parking all the way up to Oak Street to Cornelia.
Can you use your pointer and maybe get our
Yeah.
notes on there, please?
1 second. I'm gonna look for one more that might be on another sheet.
So what you're saying, Ethan, is that the purple is an hour and a half and the blue's 2 hours?
Yes, and then green would be the 24 hours in Durkee. You have 6 10-minute parking spots in the downtown.
Those are the red, I presume?
Yes, those are red. Half hour would be the yellow, and and then the red. And then the orange is 1 hour, which you would have on Court Street as an example. Right. Does this look better?
This looks a lot better.
Maybe if someone could hit the light right over there. So it's not perfect. We recently reached out to a firm to do a much more polished job. This was just used through the GIS. So
Ethan, I apologize, can you go over again, start over each one?
yeah, I will use the mouse hopefully. Okay, so you have green, which would be right here and right here. So that's 24-hour parking as it exists now. So also you'll notice on the side section of Durkee facing the Durkee parking lot facing Durkee Street is actually 2-hour parking all along there. So you also have, so blue is 2-hour parking. So you're gonna have it right there on Broad Street near the church. You're gonna have it going up here on Oak Street up until Brinkerhoff. Oak Street then turns into the purple, which is 90-minute parking, and that goes on Oak Street the rest of the way up Oak Street till you get to Cornelia. You're still gonna have more 2-hour parking on Cornelia Street around the county building, as well as on Market Street on both sides here. Trinity Place is 2 hours, City Hall Place 2 hours, all the way down to Bridge Street on both sides. The two lots, the small 17-spot lot right there on the side of the Pepper is 2-hour parking, and so is the Court Street lot directly across from 137 Margaret, which is the courthouse on the county building. So you have the streets of like Clinton, Marion, which are all 2-hour parking. That has been brought up a couple times now. And then where you have 1-hour parking is obviously on Fort Street on both sides as it exists now. On the face of Margaret Street, going along where Alecka's is. And then on the other side of the street where it's yellow, you have the half-hour, which would be going around where the Coffee Cat is, up down to the corner of Bridge Street.
Is it half hour?
Yes, it's half hour, as the current signs are. When you get down to Margaret Street, so around where you have like this restaurant with the new Twisted Carrot is, along those other areas, right on the right-hand side you see there's red, which is 10-minute parking. There's 3 spots at 10-minute parking. The mouse keeps disappearing, and the rest is half hour on that side. On the left-hand side, closer to on the side where Kinetic Running would be, you have 1 hour at the very end where you have about 3 spots, and then the rest is half-hour parking. And then on the side of Brinkerhoff, where the storefronts are going up to the intersection of Marion, you have half-hour parking as well. And then most of the bridge is 2 hours, except for 2 spots right before the access to McDonough Park, which is 10-minute parking.
So the question here is whether or not this is too complex of a system, especially considering some of the other municipalities that were noted in the documents that were provided with the parking study. None of the other cities had so many different time classifications for their on-street parking. So do we want to eliminate some of these areas, the red 10-minute section, because that's not a very practical thing to do? Do we want to standardize everything downtown for one limit, 2 hours everywhere? Or what other recommendations or ideas do people have to try and simplify things so it's a little more intuitive when you're getting around?
Well, I'll echo Kenton. What's the point of the 10 minutes? In front of Zooks, I get it, because people are presumably picking up meals.
Zooks is none.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zooks is outside
From 20 low?
That's just the one I can think of.
Oh,
that makes sense.
I mean, it's not there, it's not in the district.
No.
I
But
think it was
it's,
the bank. I think the bank was one of the reasons for the 10
MBT
minute
Bank was the
corner.
reason for the 10 minutes.
Key Bank is right on the corner there, Brinkerhoff and Margaret Street.
You also have one 10-minute spot on Clinton Street on the side of the laundromat in the very. So.
what about the one on Bridge Street, near Bridge?
That's around 20 blue.
Yeah, there's 2. There's 2 there.
Everything everywhere?
I
I would say 1 hour and 2 hours.
Unless you have a delivery area, like.
I know for me, my office is right next to the Key Bank on Brinkerhoff. And it was a few years ago they changed it. They actually sent around a survey probably 7 years ago. And we wanted it to stay half-hour parking just because it's a nail salon, it's a chiropractic office, you know, it's not a huge, people don't need to park there for a whole lot of time for those particular businesses.
Chief, when you, when we pass out tickets, when people are ticketed, is it marked, whether it's in the, do you keep track of which time zone it is? Like, is it 2 hour, a 1 hour, a 90-minute, a 30-minute? So we get the lights.
Yes.
Oh, so you can tell if it's a 10-minute violation or anything.
Hello, is
Yes.
so-and-so there? Yes.
Maybe we should wait until our next meeting, see if we have more data on that, and maybe we can evaluate it better then.
What effect it'll have on?
Because a lot of people are getting tickets in the 10-minute zones. I don't know, I think it makes sense to check that out before we.
Has any research been done why the different zones were established in the first place?
There you go. I mean, so
You might wanna look at businesses.
what does businesses want?
Mhm.
They have someone saying,
It had at least a minimum of an hour, so not 2 hours, because all the businesses in that, on that.
you said a survey went out.
Yeah, they sent a survey out, I wanna say it was about 7 years ago or so. And that was, the survey was just for the corner of Brinkerhoff and Margaret up to Marion Street. There were like 4 spaces, 3 or 4 spaces, and they sent out a survey to everyone who had a storefront there and said, what do you want? For us, we picked the 30-minute, I mean, it certainly could be 2 hours, everything else is 2 hours around.
I mean, 30 minutes, you cannot
And the
go to
10
any
minutes
of
is
those
ridiculous.
establishments and come up with 30 minutes.
Well, not to make this too much more cumbersome, but I would think that people that occupy the businesses in front of those timed parking spaces, you know, might have some input as to why they were, what they would prefer. There could be some sort of standardization from that point.
I agree, it does seem like some half-hour spots or maybe even 15-minute spots may be appropriate for certain areas because the business would want turnover. They expect turnover and they want additional parking spaces available for the next customer. I'm thinking Bridge Street as a possible between the bridge and Margaret. Right there may be an example where you might need some half-hour spots.
The thing I have at 20 below, they do the catering lunches for Bombardier and Open
Come up,
House, so they
10
need-
minutes.
Well, but they need to park there, they prep all the food in there, and it blows up, so they need more than 10 minutes or a half hour sometimes, for catering two places.
But it's,
I mean, they do it 5 days a week. I mean, it's,
Well,
you gotta find a balance in there.
Well, I can see Margaret
Catered,
Street.
yeah, perfect, too.
Yeah.
I can see the Margaret Street section, most people wanting to spend an hour. If I park there, I'm going to a restaurant there and I need probably at least an hour. But maybe it's, it would behoove us if someone went out to all the 10-minute parking spots.
And if
check with the
if 2 of
businesses.
those 10-minute parking spots can be turned into handicap spots, that would be great, because there's a lot of senior citizens, you know, who are coming to the doctor's office, who are coming to the restaurants, and they have to go elsewhere to park. So we don't have any handicap parking on that street, you have to go behind the Wilkie Street to park. And I, as a restaurant owner, I have been, you know, driving across the parking lot, bringing it back, picking them up. If we had these parking spots, at least 2 handicap parking spots out there, that would be very helpful for senior citizens.
Sounds like the committee members would like to have some more information on why the decisions to make these slots 10 minutes versus 30 minutes were made, and get some input from the property owners that own the storefronts in front of them before we recommend any changes to the signage.
I would suggest that we look at all the zones, you know, the reception of the 24-hour, obviously, but we have 10, 30, 1 hour net. Why? Why is it so random? There has to be reasons.
I think we can simplify it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be simplified, but we need.
It was all done on a case-by-case basis.
I believe that.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is, how much of this is gonna be self-regulated if we start paid parking? somebody's gotta pay for every hour that they're parking, or every
That's true.
15 minutes that they're parking, that's gonna regulate it to a great degree.
Yeah, it's all becomes moot if we go to paid parking, but until then.
Well, you get that with the cost, because we end up going through, changing, 3/4 of the signs, and in a stopgap measure, and you end up putting in paid parking, you park for some type, switch the signs again.
Yeah, I think this is too much.
Whatever decision we make, we should make one decision.
Couple
Keep it in
table
place
this
until
till
we-
the next meeting? Well, this is the church.
Do that.
Dave made a motion to table this until the next meeting. Do I have a second?
That's second.
Marion, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That is carried, so that will table to the next meeting. All right, so next item is the discussion of the current parking options to replace the Durkee Street lot capacity. You can bring up the-
Let's see if I can not mess this up this time.
Chair, who made the last motion to table?
Dave. All right, so this is some information we put together to show what the city is currently looking at for replacement of the Durkee Street lot. On the left are the various locations. And again, this is one option to find our way to the 289 spots that we will need, assuming that the entirety of the Durkee lot is developed and that no public parking on the Durkee Street site will be made available. So off street on Durkee development, again, it's 289 spots that we currently have. And we have some diagrams to show where we came up with these figures after this. But the Glens Falls surface lot, assuming demolition and creation of a new surface lot on the Glens Falls site, that could, depending on any agreements we come to with adjoining property owners, net up to 168 new parking spots. The option of a multi-story parking structure.
Matt, just,
Yeah.
is it my understanding correct that the 168 is based if you're not using any of the spaces from the church or the community bank?
It's based on.
Just
on
on the
that.
Glens Falls only, site only, and this.
No, there's actually some things that cut into the adjoining property owners, and there's a diagram that shows exactly what. Of course, that 168 is a high-end number. The Glens Falls garage, that's the possibility of a multi-story structure on the Glens Falls site, and that can go anywhere from a gain of 114 spots to 210, depending on how many levels it would be constructed to. The on-street, Durkee Street and Bridge Street, this is the diagonal parking that the Durkee developer built into their revised design. That is a net gain of 46 spots from the current publicly available parking on those two streets and those sections. The Court Street option is a redesign of the parking along Court Street, which would net the city 25 public parking spots. There's a second way to do Court Street, which would net 32 spots. And public-private partnerships, and these would be shared use agreements with private lot owners. And we chose 2 private lots, which would net the city 61 public lots, public spaces, I'm sorry. You know this way?
Trinity Park is not on there because it's not a serious consideration?
The common council shot that down when they,
It's dead in the water when it gets
Yeah.
to the town council.
Okay.
they approved it. Now this, again, is just a concept for what could be put on the Glens Falls site. This would require cooperation from both St. John's Church, from Community Bank, and also the Strand. And I know, Bob, you had a discussion with your board. But this is, again, a concept for the number of spaces that could be put into the Glens Falls lot with cooperative agreements with the adjoining property owners. It's 168 spaces. This would necessitate the closing of Division Street and its incorporation into a larger lot. But if we were able to make the necessary agreements with the adjoining property owners, that is the number of spaces that the city could fit into that new space.
Certainly if we had agreements with St. John's Shirts and the community bank, it could go some.
It certainly could, yeah. Shared use agreement with St. John's Church, that would net significantly more spaces than this, and that was actually one of the recommendations in the original parking study, would be to consolidate the church lot and community bank into a larger public lot. Of course, that didn't include Glens Falls at that time because the sale of the parcel wasn't on the table when the study was accepted.
So are you saying that the southern part of this lot is encroaching on two lots beneath it?
Yeah, I believe this particular diagram takes 16 feet from,
End of street.
yeah, the street and 16 feet into the adjoining properties. Can you go to the next slide? All right, so this is something that was worked up to show the possibilities of what a multi-story structure on the Glens Falls parcel would look like. Margaret Street's on the right. There's surface parking on the left and the rectangular structure in the center that is the garage itself. On the bottom floor, there will be 44 spots, and on each floor above, you can fit 48. And then 22 surface spots to the left.
Bottom floor excavated or not?
I'm sorry?
Bottom floor above or below grade?
It's at grade.
At grade?
Yeah. And there are some restrictions on a garage. First is the cost. The cost of a structured parking site like this, the average space cost is about anywhere from 3 to 3.5 times what you would pay for a surface lot. So this would be a several multi-million-dollar commitment from the city in order to move forward with something like this.
But it'd also be a paid lot, right?
It would also be a paid lot, yes. So yes, it's a question of what can we expect from every space in a multi-story structure versus what can we expect from a surface lot? And what are the attendant costs and debt service attached to each option? Go ahead, Ian. So this is from the prime company's proposal. This was their revised plan that added. Right, yes.
I was telling Dave is particularly fond of the anchor parking.
But this is from prime companies, and it adds 67 on-street parking spots to both Durkee Street and Bridge Street. The design, of course, at this point is conceptual and it's subject to further discussion. And
That's 46, right?
yes, the net gain to the city is 46, but it's a total of 67 diagonal spots. So the continued discussions with the developer, that'll determine the number of on-street spots and the number of all-street spots on the project site, and those are ongoing discussions. So this is a workup of one possibility to add diagonal parking to Court Street. This will necessitate turning Court Street into a one-way street. That's 53 spaces, and that is a net gain of how many from the current sub?
25.
25. And Rodney, of course, I know you would have input into this. But this would be part of future discussions with the county, because of course they have to maintain access to their property as well. Go ahead. So this is from the original parking study. This is another concept of Court Street and would require a significantly more complex redesign and more cooperation from the county than simply turning Court Street into one-way and making it diagonal parking. But this would net 104 spots.
But a lot of those are county employee parking spots now.
105.
Now, is this netting 104 or is it netting 32?
There's not counting the county's portion, so like where you would have this, like, let's say this buffer right here, just the on-street and where the current Court Street lot is, that is 104 spots.
Yeah, but that's not net.
But that's not net. The
Right.
net would be, that's why the net is 32 for that. But just an example of different options for Court Street that we can extend and get more parking out of that area that exists now.
There's a net of 32 spots compared to all the parking that's there right now.
Yes, so it's like, yeah, it's the 104 minus the 72.
That's not a lot of gain for.
At one time, there was some talk between the city and the county about actually sharing a garage that would be built on county property. Is that what that anymore?
We haven't had any discussions about it. Robbie, did you want to speak briefly on what the county requirements are going to be going forward and what you'd like to see out of any eventual plan?
Sure. I can tell you that we would prefer the previous one over this one for a couple of reasons. I think that would become a major, even though it sounds like the road would not be closed, but it'd be a parking lot. And you're gonna still have people that will go through your parking lot to get from Margaret Street to Oak Street or vice versa. And that does not create a good situation, I don't think, when you have a thoroughfare through your parking lot in terms of incidents. The other thing is, we have our loading dock that would be blocked from here. Right now, our entrance allows a tractor trailer to go straight back, and it wouldn't be allowed. We'd have to change this configuration somewhat to allow that to occur. I can say in general, I mean, the full legislature hasn't talked about this, but what I suspect would happen outside of any permits would be those spaces would all fill with county employees that want to start work at 8 o'clock. You'd be filling most of this parking lot, including the ones that the city are adding, and they would not park in our Oak Street parking lot, which is further. Unless you're going to eliminate that possibility through some sort of permit system or parking system, and I don't think the county would go for paid parking for our visitors or our employees. This would be very difficult to accomplish, I think. The county has, we have about 400 people who work in the government center complex. Now, not all of those people work during the days, not all of them are full-time. We have enough parking spaces now at the government center complex for our employees and a reasonable number of visitors, except during the times that there's grand jury and there's a jury pool. Things become much more tight during those periods of time. For the Department of Social Services, we have about 160 employees, and we have far less spots. Clearly, we rely on the Derby Street parking lot for a majority of our employees there. Clearly, there's opportunity for the city and the county to have discussions on, as we move forward in parking, how to accommodate our employees, because that's certainly a consideration of ours, to make sure that they have convenient, affordable parking. But we do have the Oak Street parking lot that is not shown here because it's not a public lot, although we do allow it to be used for city functions and events. And it should be said that we do also allow our parking lot to be used after 5. We don't close the parking lot. I know all of Ridley's patrons use our parking lot regularly. When we have, the Strand has large functions, our parking lot is utilized quite heavily for those as well, which we encourage. We want to allow our parking lot to be used for those purposes.
Parking study, I think, mentions promoting walkways down Marion Ave for such events.
And somebody was it you, Dave, that mentioned parking garage? Yeah. I don't think that we've had a discussion recently about that, in large part because the county hasn't perceived that we need it for the demand. Our demand was greatly relieved when we opened the Oak Street parking lot, which has an additional 89 spaces. So that helped our situation considerably. And now that we have an enforcement going on, we actually have county employees park there on a regular basis. Part of it is what Matt was saying. It's costly to build a parking garage. It is a very costly.
Social services is going to be a huge issue.
That is going to be an issue.
And they are county employees.
Right. I don't think. We would hope that there'd be a closer alternative for Department of Social Services than a parking structure at this location.
But what are the parking needs of the Department of Social Services?
And the visitors and clients. Pardon me?
How many?
About 162 employees.
And that's not clients.
No, that's right. Now, the county does have about 45, 50 spots on our site. My understanding is those are devoted principally to our employees that are disabled and need to be closer to the building, but most of them are used by clients.
Are there more positions open on this board?
There's one more. There's an advocate for someone with this.
Person with disabilities.
I was gonna ask about that, but, yeah. Somebody.
And actually, a gentleman called me yesterday about that, so I'm gonna reach out to him. All right, Ethan, you wanna go to the next one? All right, so this is one of the options for what we discussed as basically public-private partnerships with private lot owners. The benefits from this, from the city's angle, is that it would be very low cost because the lots already exist, no construction needs to take place. Also, from a standpoint of timing, because an agreement such as this can be negotiated in a matter of weeks to months rather than all of the additional steps that go into the creation of the new lots, that's purchase of property, demolition, permitting, and then actual construction. Considering the city's financial position, this is a more preferable way to go about finding the parking that we need to replace Turkey. It is a question of finding private lot owners who are willing to discuss shared use agreements with the city and negotiating agreements that the city council can approve of.
Is this parking lot?
It's
Klaus, is that his lot?
yeah, it's right next to the chiropractor's office on Harvard Street.
Oh, we have more.
It's like right over there. You can
Right
almost
over
see
there.
it from the
Across
windows.
from Chip International Bank,
Yeah.
on Market.
So this is 45 spots. Based on the way it's currently laid out, we don't think it's maximized for usage, so repainting could increase the number of spots. It could be used as an additional lot for either city or county employees or for residents or visitors. It's less than 500 feet from the county complex, and it's currently underutilized. It's less than a 5-minute walk from the intersection of Market and Bridge, and that actually was indicated to be the center of downtown from the walkability study that was completed as part of the DRI Streetscape project. So this is one option that we could look at. I don't think I've ever driven past this lot and seen more than 10 cars in it. So it's certainly an option that we're going to be looking at. The other option that we chose here was a Marion Street lot. And this is behind the bank on Brinkerhoff Street, the old bank. It's 32 spots, it's very close to downtown, it's potential parking for employees. The one thing about this spot is that based on the study that was done, there's a max utilization of it of 50%, so it's 32 spots, which means that there are 16 available even in times of peak usage that could be made available to city partners. Go ahead, Ethan. Another option, and this is down off of Guy Way on the other side of the Memorial Bridge. It's kind of a mishmash of different parcels, but there is quite a significant amount of open space there. I know, Dave, you're involved with just down there. So this could be a great option for longer term employee residential parking, and again, it's very close to the center of downtown. Go ahead. So replacement parking, yeah, sorry.
Has there been any discussion at the council level on what the carrot's gonna be to get these property owners to let the city partner with them?
We've had some initial discussions with property owners. It's going to be a mix of ensuring that they have continued access to the lot, and there's also going to be some financial incentive for them to go along with it. But detailed discussions with the council, we haven't gotten into that yet. So again, to replace everything that we expect to lose on Durkee, it's 289 spots. The potential parking spots are gained, and that figure actually needs to be reduced to 300, because I screwed up the math. But Glens Falls, that's 168 spots, assuming we can come to agreements with the adjoining property owners. Court Street, that's 25 net new spots if we turn it to one-way. Durkee and Bridge Street, that's 46 new spots if we are instituting angled parking. And the partnership agreements with just the 2 private lots that we listed here, that nets 61 new net spots, and that's a total of 300 new spots that the city would have available for public parking. Now, we certainly could look at additional spots. One of the recommendations in the parking study was that the city not overbuild to overcompensate for the loss of Durkee. It's kind of the philosophy that if you build it, they will come, but that doesn't really hold very often when it comes to building parking in the expectation of additional demand when you don't have specific development projects in mind to create that demand. So what we're looking at is trying to create more spaces than we are losing on Durkee, but not an excessive amount of new spaces because it's inadvisable based on the conversation we've had with John Forster. So that 300 total spots gain, that's a net gain of 11 new spots. It brings us right above the point at which we're looking to hit. The Court Street option, construction costs will be limited because all we'd really be doing is changing the way that the lines are paved on the street. And as I said earlier, entering into shared use agreements with private lot owners should also help reduce costs. So that is the end of that presentation.
What's the status of the lot that is south of Broad Street Bridge? Bridge Street option?
Yeah, that's a city lot. But currently it's open for parking anytime.
Is that filled most of the time? Do we know?
It's filled more often when there are auctions going on, but most of the time, yeah.
Every day.
Every day it's filled?
Every
Yeah.
day.
Every day, yes, that's around the whole county.
If you're not in the Durkee Street parking lot by 7:45, you're not gonna find a parking spot. If the overflow goes there and on the ramp behind the federal building. It's full every day.
The Durkee Street lot is filled every day as well in its
Yes.
entirety? Is that?
There's sparse spaces.
Try going
but
there at 9 o'clock to
basically
find a
filled.
spot, and it'll be
Well,
difficult to find.
I go down there a lot, there's spaces, but they're
Maybe
not
as
always
people are
close.
coming and going for their jobs.
By the river, there's usually spaces. I mean, I don't wanna argue with it, but it's,
There's very few.
oh, I know, but there, I've never had a problem.
It's just discouraging.
Let's just say we never, nobody ever parks down there.
I'll move the table for the discussion on this topic and move on to the next topic.
Second? Second. Discussion on table?
One, but just one, I want to just put it into the record.
Sure.
During the DRI discussions, and also this has to do with the Saranac River Trail, I really think the city would be missing the boat if they didn't look at extending Durkee, getting permits and stuff ready to do a bridge to utilize that NICEAG property, because at some point it will be usable. If it's fully clean, fine. If it's not cleaned enough to residential or other uses, it would make a great parking lot. It's right there.
We're talking about a bridge from Durkee across the river. That's
South
actually
of
part
Durkee.
of Saranac River.
Yeah, that's already
too.
Well, no, but that's only a
That's pedestrian.
pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the
Which is,
Yeah, it's pedestrian.
yeah.
I can understand why we're not talking about that, because it's too far off in the future. In
Yeah.
fact, it's not even defined when that
NICEAG
may be
tell
available.
us when that would even be an
But it
option.
should
to
be
do
on
for
in our
property owners.
horizon.
Yeah, that's certainly something to think about.
The inclusion of
That's
Saranac.
being closed, right. The other footbridge is being closed because we can't afford that either, because you're gonna build another bridge to accommodate parking.
Guys, there'll be a second opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. Go ahead, Bob.
The inclusion of the Strand parcel is not very feasible at this point, based on our plans for one. Plus, we have some covenants and restrictions releasing.
Okay. Is that the Federal Department of Education? That's the landlord? Okay.
Have any of the private owners been approached? And the
Yes.
reason that
I mean,
one-
these lots that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
because the reason the one is empty is because he charges quite a bit. He's not been generally cooperative with the other businesses.
Yeah, and if a particular lot owner is either unwilling to work with the city or is insisting upon what are unreasonable terms, there are several other private owners we can approach. based on the parking study, the number of private lots downtown, even at peak usage, there were something like 270 spots that weren't being used. So there is parking out there to be had. It's just a question of what's the most convenient way and the least expensive way to get it done for the city.
Isn't the parking lot next to the stream private?
Yes.
But you haven't mentioned that.
No, it's another option. We were simply using this as an example to show how we could get to that number of 289.
There's quite a large lot, so I thought that would be.
Oh, that's a lot you were just referring to.
No, I was referring to the surround lot.
Yeah, he's referring to the other lot. There's a lot, okay, so there's a lot on the corner on Oak and, Rincon. That's the lot I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about the other one on the other side of the
Well,
building.
the other one is, that doesn't belong to the Strand.
No, I'm
Yeah,
saying it's a
it's
private
private.
lot, I know the owner, you didn't mention it in the lots we're talking about, maybe gaining some public parking, so I just wondered why.
We chose two lots that brought us, just again, for the sake of example, bringing us above that 289 number, but not too far above it. So there are certainly other options out there that we are looking at.
Yeah,
It's not just those two that we showed.
I think because of location, it could be.
All right, so David made a motion and it was seconded that we table discussion on this into a further meeting. Any further discussion on that?
For everybody, it seems like we're tabling all of these, and we are. We are gonna have to start making decisions. I saw this meeting more as, let's get acquainted with all of the issues and, right. And, you know, some of the things that we're gonna talk about will impact some of the things that we've already talked about, so.
I'll move to table that, because this discussion is gonna go on for weeks. It's 8.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on the motion to table? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, moving on to number 7, parking information for the city's website.
I'll move to table this discussion.
Before we discuss it. Do I have a second on that?
Besides second.
Like I said, discussion on tabling the city's website discussion.
Just that, obviously, we'll probably have to have a website, but I have no problem tabling it.
Yeah, okay.
I think it'd be more, I'll put that, like, it seems like the website, we're gonna wanna update it, we're going for some more information.
Yeah,
on some of the
and there were
others.
recommendations for parking study as to what to include, so I just wanted to include it. All right, so, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, all opposed? All right, number 8, schedule regular times for advisory committee meetings. Dave, you mentioned using Doodle and rather than setting a standard time.
Well, I mean, we can have parameters as far as like every quarter or every other month. But I'm saying when we come to the physical time, it would be nice to have a couple of.
Yeah, that's no problem, we can do that.
I will say to that, you could get, I mean, we're gonna have 12 members on this committee.
So you have one that's a more popular, if you can make the meeting, you're gonna make the meeting. But
Yeah.
at least you've had a say in letting people know what your requirements are.
And also, it seems that there's quite a lot of members of the public here, so I think if they know well ahead of time, that's better. I will also note that I could perceive that, the common council says we need to meet at least quarterly. I would imagine that at least at the beginning, we're gonna want to meet more often.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on how often you'd like to meet to begin with? Every month, every other month?
I think it's like-
Monthly?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Somebody wanna make a motion?
Second.
Second? Discussion?
Let's do it.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay. So at this time, we'll invite members of the public to come speak to the committee on any parking related matter of interest to the city.
Sure, I'll go first if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I jotted down a few notes as the conversations were going on, so there may be a little bit about a context here with me. We addressed some of them as your meeting proceeded. But I just want to point out a few things for your consideration. The daytime parking, there are many tenants that I know personally that work night shifts in the city that are tenants here. So think about how you're going to accommodate them. so they don't have to go out, they're sleeping during the day, gotta go out all day long and move their car every 2 hours, and we certainly don't want to do that. Analysis of parking district fees, you touched on that, Matt, thank you, that was a good job. But I would also urge you to consider those downtown owners that have already invested millions of dollars, literally, in downtown already, based on a parking district being there already. Okay? So now that parking district has gone away, and there's been investments made, literally to the tune of millions of dollars. So consider that, please. Also, I ask you to Google level of service for parking. Okay, Google that. It's the level of service for parking and.
For different types of uses you're talking about?
No, Google level of service for parking, and you'll see it is similar to a level of service of an intersection based on uses. Level service of parking is based on the proximity of a parking spot to a place of business, a restaurant, an apartment, that kind of thing. When you start to drop off, you below level D and E and those kinds of things.
So it's specifically, Scott, looking at distance from various
Distance,
uses?
yes, yeah, I mean, you know, the Glens Falls alternative, you know, compared to, well, even the employees of the city here and lower City Hall Place and those areas, you're getting over 1,000 feet. And don't just draw a circle, you know, actually plot the path of what you have to walk to accomplish those distances. I mean, your zoning ordinance, I think, requires new development to have parking spaces within 500 feet of you know, your business or your new apartments or whatever. So when you get out beyond 1,000 feet, I think that's something that needs to be considered. You know, your consideration of what was I think referred to as the harbor parking down on Dock Street. You know, that parking was funded for and built for proposed development at that location. There's still a vacant lot down there that is available to the city for development. That parking lot was built there. It was built to replace the old brownfield that was, you know, down there, the contaminated property, the old rail yard. I think, you know, it was a good use of the funds to clean that up. The funds were used to build the parking lot, but that parking lot was designed and intended for development of that vacant land that's remaining down there. So consider that as part of the solution question. Diagonal parking along Durkee and Bridge Street. I think that's just a silly solution, frankly. I think it's been tried before here in the city, and it was found to be a silly solution. You know, I know we all got to think outside the box and see Plattsburgh, you know, grow and develop. But you know, parallel parking, excuse me, diagonal parking in downtown areas, that's something that's been tried, not just in our city, but in other cities before, and it's been abandoned.
Are you saying that perpendicular parking is as silly, or no?
Perpendicular on a street?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty silly too.
That's
Parallel,
even worse.
You know, parallel parking on city streets is you know, pretty much the norm. I think that you'll find throughout other cities of our size. So, you know, I think diagonal parking, you know, it was a good solution for the developer to consider 2 nights before he came to our meeting, but I think it needs further thought by this committee here. Now the analysis that you're doing, the parking plan for the other spaces, you know, I'm encouraged that you're doing that, you're looking at these other spaces, but what I haven't seen so far is a plan for funding that alternative parking. I think your committee's probably going to have to consider that at some point. How is that going to be funded? Since the PRI funds, I think, are pretty much spoken for, probably don't address some of the issues that were brought up in these alternative parking plans. So there's not enough parking to respond to the new parking enforcement. Yeah, you know, I worked out here, and Joe, you've been down there, many of you have been down here. And that new parking enforcement that's in place, I think that's great. I think it's effective. It's freeing up a lot of spaces on the city streets, but man, it's taxing Derby Street parking lot. I think if the parking study were done now, as opposed to when it was done, I think you would see some different results in terms of the impact on the Derby Street parking lot.
So you're saying Derby Street parking is more full now?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Anybody down here parks, I come and go frequently from my place of business. I have to go out, you know, during the day for meetings and so forth. When I come back, I'm experiencing a much harder time to find a parking space down there. I had to go over on the roof of the parking space the other day to find a parking spot. So having a hard time finding a parking space. The other comment I made, don't have a wink policy. Yeah, let's be realistic about it. Let's not say that we're gonna, you know, for the city police department, I think if you're gonna, you know, enforce it, either say absolutely outright, you're only gonna enforce parking from 8 to 4, or, you know, don't just turn a blind eye to it, because that's not fair for planning, you know, to make an investment. Because the city you may find the funds to hire an additional person to help enforce parking. So let's have a clear understanding of what the parking policy is, and not have everybody rely on, well, it's the weekend, so I can illegally park, or it's night, so I can illegally park. Let's have a clear understanding. I hope it's well defined. Permits are fine, but I'm concerned whether there will be adequate space to accommodate those permit holders. You mentioned permit holders for people that work downtown, and for tenants downtown, and that's fine. That's a good policy. And, you know, believe me, I'm not advocating for free parking. I think everybody's going to have to pay. But my concern is there's not going to be adequate spaces for those permit holders to find a place to park. You know, I think that's really what we're looking at. And I applaud your efforts to, you know, try to create this parking replacement plan, but I think that's a bit of, you know, frankly, I think it's some smoke and mirrors. You know,
You're saying there's a parking appeasement study?
Pardon me?
Parking appeasement study?
Replacement, the
Just
parking replacement study. Yeah, yeah, well, but yeah, you know, I think those, you know, it's valid to take a look at those, but you know, unless there's MOUs in place with those private owners, unless there's funding in place to develop those parking lots, you know, how realistic is it to really consider those replacement lots? So, and again, like I said before, you know, I think this is all, you know, kind of the cart before the horse. I really wish that we were doing this exercise that you're doing here now before the RFP was issued for the development of Derby Street. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nick Crawford, I'd just like to make a few comments. History, way back in the 60s, the parking meter systems was quite profitable for the city of Plattsburgh. Used to make a lot of money with metering and parking. In the early 70s, they had a topics project that came in and did away with the parallel parking on Margaret Street. I was in charge of seeing to that it got done. Okay, we took away all the parallel parking, made it what it is today. And when you watch north of the bank on the Key Bank, it's very hard to even parallel park because we've narrowed the road so far down. If you're trying to park on that side of Margaret Street and the traffic is this way, it's very hard to get in there. But just giving you some history, I was part of it. I did it. I did it, I'm the fault.
Thank you, Dick.
My name is Carol Solari Rusco. I'm a representative from Elmore SPCA. We do have a thrift shop on Clinton Street. I have been asked by some of the volunteers working at that store to please address you. There are a couple that has some physical issues. We're talking about older adults that work in the store, and asking if it's possible to have a parking permit on Clinton Street. Only one would be needed, but that would provide the workers that do drive access to a parking space on that, where they're not moving the car, and I learned something about the zone tonight. You're not moving the car every hour and a half or so. I know you're talking about permits, and my question is, and you don't have to give me an answer, but if parking permits are available, made available to workers in downtown Plattsburgh, are they going to be exempt from paying parking charges, especially at Rescue Treasures, because they are volunteers? So I'm just offering it up as a question and a concern. Thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Just have a few more things I wanted to add. One thing about, Scott, I think, mentioned something about the metered parking. I mean, they do this in Vermont, they do this in Lake Placid, and the study that you did was based on some of those very cities. So I'm wondering if the city has taken that into consideration about metered parking reinstating them, and what benefit that might have. And I just want to put this out there too. I think it's a shame that none of this, nothing concerning the space behind the D&H was considered for development of the condominiums or anything else that you're proposing in the Durkee Street parking lot. I think it's a huge waste. It's a huge waste of resources. We wouldn't be talking about replacing a lot of this parking lot that were considered. All those people in the summertime, especially, that come in where the Naked Turtle is, the boat launch is there, they would be inclined to walk up to downtown and explore downtown in that regard as well. So I think it's a shame that that wasn't even a consideration. That being said, the diagonal parking, I'll readdress that. That was tried on 4th Street, where the senior center currently is. Used to be the old MAI High School. Didn't work. It was tried at one time down by the post office. Didn't work. I don't know why anybody would think it's going to work on Bridge Street or Durkee Street. It hasn't worked twice. I mean, I don't get why you would waste time and energy and funds attempting that. I think there's a huge issue with client and employee safety going on with assuming that people who work in the social services building have opportunity to walk a block or more away. Many of our employees are carrying car seats, heavy bags. They're going out on emergency calls. They're transporting children for visitation. They're taking supplies out to vulnerable elderly people in the community. It's not a feasible resolution to the parking issue that we have right now. I mean, it just isn't. And a lot of the people that work there too do have health considerations, and I don't think any of that was taken into consideration either. And I would also like to add, I think the money for the signage to re-sign downtown would be a lot less expensive, like to get rid of the 10-minute parking to make it maybe more consistent throughout, would probably be less expensive in the long run than redeveloping a lot of this parking area. It just, to me, in my mind, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but it makes sense in my head. I mean, a few signs versus tearing up concrete and knocking down buildings and creating more parking. And as far as the permits go, let's be honest, none of us are getting rich working in the businesses downtown. So now we're gonna, on top of our salaries that we're making, we're gonna have to pay to park. I mean, is that going to fall on, and I'm not talking just social services, many other businesses downtown too, is that cost going to now burden those employers? Are they gonna have to compensate us in our paychecks because now we have to pay to go to our jobs and support our families? It doesn't seem fair to the people that have been already working in those districts and supporting those businesses and bringing revenue to the city. Also, let's see. A lot of the downtown, just touch back on the parking meters, a lot of the downtown business is generated from visitors to Plattsburgh too, so I think you'd gain money just from outside visitors using those meters. And as I wanted to also touch on the underground parking that was proposed in plans that Prime had done last week. That's less cost effective than building up. So I didn't know why there weren't plans done to build up versus underground. And
historical.
Oh, yeah, and also, I mean, and then we didn't talk about this tonight, but I was personally disgusted. I love the old buildings downtown, they're historical to what Plattsburgh was built on, and those modern facades that were proposed to put on the fronts of those beautiful old brick buildings, I think is a disgrace to what Plattsburgh represents. I think you're losing a lot of historical value of this city.
Talking about the proposed buildings in the Derby Street Park?
No, that, there was, one of the slides, it was put up there briefly again, well, that.
Oh, for the parking garage structures.
Well, no, not even there. You know where like the dress code is, and on the other corner where Our House Bistro is, and those buildings, they had these hideous looking facades to try to modernize those beautiful old buildings. And I don't know why anybody in their right mind would want to think that that's what Plattsburgh, downtown Plattsburgh represents. It's silly to waste the money to do that to the fronts of those buildings too. And I just wanted to touch on that. When I saw that, it was laughable to me, so. That's all.
You're not paying for that, right?
Thank you.
It was horrible. Not much else to say, most people have said everything. I know it's costly to build any structure, but a lot of the concerns that have brought forth tonight deal with losing parking in Derby Street right across from the DSS and some of the other areas. And the Bridge Street parking lot that's primarily used by the auction house is a perfect location, and it's just never mentioned about how.
We're using it. It's full every day.
No, I'm not saying that you're not
I'm
using it.
sorry.
I'm saying that, you're proposing a garage, you probably won't build a garage on part of the Glens Falls National Bank site. And I know it's not as large, but the footprint, and again, I didn't see the square footage, but the footprint for the above-ground portion of a garage or of above-ground parking, I think would be better utilized to put in the Bridge Street location, because I think, as mentioned, we're trying to facilitate a multifaceted parking plan and solution. And I think part of the problem is that we're losing sight of the uses throughout the city and how it needs to be addressed. And the Bridge Street site, I think, is really a location that we need to look at funding in the future or work into the plan, whether it be in the next year or two or whatever. We're gonna have a short and long-term plan and how we can get funding for that. But I think that's where we need to invest some money. I also think we have a big problem here in trying to give free parking permits to the downtown corridor with how are we gonna do snow removal? How are we gonna tackle that? Most of the residents, whether they be transient or whether they be long-term downtown, you have residents and tenants, and as a property owner, parking is valuable, and there's no way for them to live if they don't have parking. So there's been no mention. In Montreal, they do, one street, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they do snow removal. On the opposite side, they do snow removal. I think that our city has come up with a terrific plan on how to resolve and eliminate problems with snow removal during the winter. But how are we going to address that if you're giving permits to people in that downtown corridor? I think permits need to be done, but I think you need to work in paid permits. I think you have to have a multi-approach. The meter is, a lot of cities do during this time, business hours, we're gonna have a meter in place, and after this time, we're not gonna have a meter in place. And some cities have permitted areas, like in Montreal, they have, let's say, in a zone, because we're talking about zone, they have these residents that live on this side, they're allowed to park between this time and this time, and they have parking permits. When you're thinking about permits, you need to think about the large scope of all the different types of people that are going to use those permits. And it is a problem. The people that are handicapped, that work downtown, that volunteer, that's a problem. But you're going to have to somehow come up with a solution. I think the only way you're going to come up with a solution is have more input from the businesses and the people that utilize the parking downtown. And that means the owners of those buildings as well. So I do ask you to think about this long and hard, because there's nothing worse than developing a plan or building parking and then not have it utilized to the best use, or have problems to retain, people in the downtown. And I know I mentioned it, you're gonna look at it, but maybe reach out to the owner of the parking lot that's on the corner of Oak and Brookhoff. That's a prime location for parking, and it's underutilized, except when the Strand has an event. And the other problem is the angle parking. I know I live on Couch Street. I will tell you that the whole plan that we had for angle parking on Court Street did not work. It's true, David's right. Nobody seems to know how to park at an angle. And so it's a problem. I agree that it was a great solution to have Oak Court as one way. That's a lot of unused parking, but I think when you put in angle parking, I think it's gonna be really, really a problem. And so I look forward to changes and working together, but I think some of the sites that you've mentioned are great to have for parking. And although you've said that you don't want to make too many parking spaces, I think that, as Rodney mentioned, I think we need to do the enforcement. I think that will really free up some spaces for people that come to the downtown, because it's true. If there's a parking space that's close to a business, that's where they're gonna park. And you need to have something, and the zones, that's the first time I knew about zones, so I think that advertising isn't enough. I think you need to, just like in other cities, and maybe I'm crazy, but I think you need to have it on the signage so that it's very clear how you're gonna enforce it and what it is. Thank you very much for working so hard.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Before you let people out, can we just do an informal survey of the number of people who work downtown, and then the number of people who live downtown that are actually here? Raise your hand.
Yeah, sure. How many people here currently live downtown?
Okay.
4?
Yeah.
5? Yeah. How many people here work downtown? Anybody? That's about 30, 40, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Big time.
All right, if there are no other comments from the public, I'll add my thanks to the members of this committee for agreeing to serve. I know you're all very busy, your time and efforts are greatly appreciated. Aside from that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? All right, thank you all.